Hello and welcome back to Suburban Garbage Garage. Today I wanted to take a little time to discuss something that had been running through my head and an idea for a video to make, and that is the top 5 tool upgrades for the DIY mechanic. So my thought on this is there might be somebody out there that's got their first job at the Tire Kingdom or somewhere like that, or just an interested mechanic, and you kind of want to go beyond your normal set of just wrenches and sockets. You know, that's the first step, is you got to get your set of wrenches and sockets. But where do you go from there? What's useful and might get you out of a pinch? Well, that's kind of what I want to cover here. So made a little top 5 list of what I think is the most useful tool upgrades for you. So I'm going to start at number 5 and work my way down to number 1. Number 5 is actually kind of 2 items. So I put these at number 5 because it's useful, but use with caution. So that is your classic box wrench or adjustable end wrench and a pipe. And I don't think this pipe fits on the end, but the idea would be to have a pipe that you could slide over the handle to increase your leverage. It's kind of and one extra to this. It's the breaker bar. So I kind of group these two together. The pipe will fit on the breaker bar. But the concept here is you get your stuck nuts. These things are... This is a horrible tool. Let me just do an aside here real quick and say this is a horrible tool to use for just taking off nuts. Go get the correct wrench. Don't futz around trying to use this for everything. This has its uses for like tie bar end lengths and doing an alignment and tie rod end length adjustments, and a few other little useful ways. That's why it's at number 5, because this thing actually can get you in more pickles than it'll get you out of. But when you do need it, and it's what you got, it's good to have it there. Get you out of a pickle. Mostly combined with a nice breaker bar. And also that'll get you out of a pickle a lot of times. You got some stuck lug nuts, stuck brake caliper bolts in a hard to reach place. Just the standard old breaker bar. That thing is invaluable. It took me years to get one. I ended up actually getting an impact wrench before I actually got a breaker bar, and I still use it. You know, even though I've got an impact, I use this all the time. But those super useful tools, but again, use with caution. You know, you wouldn't supplement a 1/2-inch drive ratchet with a breaker bar or a box wrench. It has that one use, breaking loose nuts. All right, let's move on. Number 4. That's a good old pair of vice grips. And I could go one further and throw in a set of, let me do this. There we go. One step further. 2 sets of vice grips. So these come infinitely handy. I mostly use these in fabrication, and say like you're trying to hold a piece of sheet metal and drill a hole in it. This is extremely useful. Then I also use these, say you're doing a brake caliper change and you don't want brake fluid leaking all over the floor when you take the banjo bolt off. Well, in a pinch, you can take this, maybe wrap it up with a little leather glove on the inside, or a little piece of leather so that the teeth don't dig into your brake line, and you can pinch off your brake line and keep from dripping fluid everywhere. It's got 1,000 uses, and you know, mostly I use it for fabrication, hence the welding spatter that's all over it, but 1,000 uses, relatively cheap, very handy, and I've always liked the straight wall ones because of that brake line trick. You can use it with other lines too, vacuum lines, whatever. And this one, I didn't originally have it, it just came into my head that I should probably include this. I use this on about every oil change. I just have a bunch of Toyotas, so they're pretty easy, but got it from Harbor Freight, and it's awesome. You know, it's adjustable, so it's not like, yeah, it's the thing people get all screwed up with when you're removing an oil filter. It doesn't matter what you do to it. You can mangle the living shit out of it as long as it comes off. And this, on a stuck oil filter, will get it off. You know, you don't... So this is the last, you know, that's the last thing that filter will ever see. But, vice grips, infinitely useful. Number three is, and I got these in a set, but I just pulled the one out. That is a Pry Bar, classic Pry Bar. You know, another thing it took me a long time to eventually get around to. I worked with a lot of mechanics, they had a lot of Pry Bars, and I would just use a screwdriver for the longest time, and I bent the shit out of so many screwdrivers that I said, you know what, maybe it's not a bad idea, just go get a set of Pry Bars down at, I think, Northern Tool. I guess that was from Lowe's. It's a Cobalt. You know, it doesn't have to be anything fancy. This size is the one I use the most, and it's like 12 inches there, maybe 14, 16 inches. You know, just enough to pull a ball joint down, or like give you a little leverage on a suspension arm or something, and it's made for prying, so your screwdrivers don't get all bent up. Saves you money in the long run. Just buy a Pry Bar. That's why it's number 3. Very useful in those hard to get to jobs. You know, anybody that's done ball joints knows that you got to put a little downward pressure on that ball joint to get it to come loose, or a tie rod in. And that's where that's where it shines. It makes that job a lot easier. Number 2. So, I know it's just a regular old big 6-inch C-clamp, but I use this for more stuff than I can count. Get in the frame a little better. I use this to push back brake calipers after I take the pads out. I take the brake pad and I put it, the old brake pad, and I put it up against there, and I just push the caliper back in with this. And as long as they're not rusted to hell, it works just fine. You know, use it in metal fabrication a lot. Use it to kind of hold things in place while you're taking other things apart. It's just, you'll be amazed, mostly when it comes to, like, yet again, I work on my old 86 Celica, and yeah, they don't make stuff for it. So little things, a lot of time I end up repairing a lot of broken plastic with small pieces of bent up sheet metal, punching holes, putting in prop rivets. And so I'm always clamping stuff down, drilling holes in it. And this comes in handy, infinite possibilities, and mostly use it to do your brake calipers. I've seen people use channel locks where you get the big set of channel locks that's got a jaw that wide and you can push the caliper back. And I've also seen it crack calipers, and I've never had a problem cracking calipers with this, as long as they're not rusted to hell, which in that case, replace your caliper. Number 2. And number one, this is gonna be probably a little bit underwhelming as number one, but this is my top pick for just the bang for your buck, something to get to help you get through little simple car projects. And that is a set of picks. And I got this at Kmart years ago for $5. And I don't know how the case still works, but it does. But I use these for literally every job. I think it's very rare that I've done a job that I don't use these. Because you know what? Mostly this pick or this pick. The angled ones, when you're working on a radiator hose, vacuum line, we've all been there, where the hose is kind of stuck onto the little fitting, and you're pulling and the hose, it's just been on there so long, it's kind of stuck. And there's no way to get off. You know, you jam a screwdriver under it or you pull it until the hose breaks. But you take this little curved pick and you just pop it under the hose. I got a little piece of wood here that I can kind of demonstrate on. So say the hose is sitting over this fitting, imaginary hose. You dig it under the hose and you run it under the hose. And you just drag that around to break that seal. And once the seal's broken, the hose comes off. So I've done that 1,000 times with these things. Doesn't harm the hose as long as you're smart about it. And you know, it's works like a charm. And all you need is a $5 set of picks. There's nothing else that can really reach in there like that and break that hose loose. And you can sit there and crank on it all day and probably tear the hose up or break the fitting. It happens. But then for cleaning out little small, tiny little orifices and getting into little plugged up, I don't know. I use this thing to clean my coffee maker in the house. I use it for everything. I use it to mix up epoxy. It just falls to hand, you know, whenever I'm looking at a project, interior, pulling out stereos, taking off door trims, you'll find a way. You'll find a reason to use it. It's not great for prying. Yeah, if you're taking off door trim, you probably want one of those door trim panel sets, but you know, getting behind. Oh, another thing I've used these for. Finding obstructions in bolt holes. So I've also used these as like feelers. You can put it down into a little bolt hole and see if there's some sort of obstruction. Same with this. I bought a head once for my Jeep and I was having trouble bolting the head on. The head bolts were bottoming out before they should. And I was like, what in the world is this? What is this? And finally I got the sense. I was like, I can't see down in there. I can't hardly do anything. And the bolt just stops before it should. So I ran the pick down there and I felt around with the pick and I felt an obstruction down there. And I was like, well, what is this? So it turns out they had run a helicoil, the machine shop, whoever I bought the head from, had run a helicoil for one of the exhaust flange bolts into the head bolt's path for the head bolt. So this helicoil is coming from the side and actually jamming into there. And the only way I could really see it or tell it was there was by feeling it with the pick. Just, you know, you gotta think about these things a little bit and try to, sometimes you can't always lay eyes on it. But that's why that's the number one tool I have literally for $5. I don't know if this brand is even around anymore, but they've never given me a problem. They work perfect. They're hard. I use them even just around the house for more things that you would think of. But hope you all enjoyed it. That was just a little top 5 video. Maybe I'll come out with some more stuff later. I'm really hoping to get into working and doing some general maintenance on the Celica and get into some items where maybe I'll do some struts and shocks on that. And just kind of wanted to run you through the shop a little bit and talk about what I do as a mechanic and what I think about as a, not really a mechanic, just a shade tree mechanic working out of his garage here. But Take it easy. See you next time.